Hi, I'm Tony Richards. I'm going to take you around San Francisco on a little tour of things tourists don't usually see. I'm going to avoid Fisherman's Wharf and the usual tourist traps. I brought you here first because this is what they call the Painted Ladies. These 6 little houses. They survived the 1906 earthquake. But I'm going to take you around town, the points of interest where I take friends and relatives when they come to San Francisco, places where I take them. My great-grandparents settled here in 1870. That makes me a third-generation native. I was born half a mile from here. I grew up in the city. So we're going to take you around. Let's go. This is the house off the TV show Full House, right here. Now, they only used the front of the house on the TV show, and the rest of it was filmed in a studio. But people come here. It's a tourist attraction. They stand on the stairs and have their pictures taken. So the owners got fed up and put this little fence up, and I don't blame them. But it is a tourist attraction. People are here every day, all the time, coming by and having their picture taken in front of the Full House house. It was on the market last year, I believe. A couple $1 million, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, here it is. The house they use on the TV show, Full House. I'm here at the corner of Steiner and Broadway in Pacific Heights, and behind me is the Mrs. Doubtfire house. In the movie, it was painted a light yellow, but they since painted it gray. But anyway, it's not as big as it appears in the movie. It appears bigger in the movie. It seems smaller in person. I'm at the parade grounds in the Presidio, and I stopped here to show you the Officers Club. Even though Mission Dolores was built in 1776, the adobe walls of the Officers Club allegedly date back to the same time period, 1776. But the building has been remodeled over the years numerous times. Okay. I'm in the Presidio at the former site of Letterman General Hospital. George Lucas built all these buildings for Industrial Light and Magic, his other company, and he since sold it to Disney. This is a statue of Yoda, and what most people don't know is there's another identical statue in Marin County. George Lucas lives in San Anselmo. I probably shouldn't be saying that. But he lives in San Anselmo, and he bought a building downtown, tore the building down and made a park, and there's another Yoda statue over there. So there's actually 2 of them. So I like to bring people here to show them this because it's an oddity. I'm here at looking at the iconic Golden Gate Bridge. I said I'd avoid typical tourist traps, but this one is special. My uncle was an ironworker on the bridge, building the bridge, and my grandmother walked across the bridge on opening day, and my grandfather, who was a San Francisco police lieutenant, was in the motorcade on opening day. This is August, so if you come here in the summer, always bring long pants and a jacket, You can see how today is your typical sunny day in most parts of the city, but it's foggy here at the Golden Gate. Interesting side note, I've lived in this area my whole life. I've never walked across it. It's a little over a mile long. Just something I never did. Never been to Alcatraz either. Right now I'm on El Camino del Mar in the Seacliff area. Seacliff is an exclusive area of the city overlooking the Golden Gate. And the house behind me, where the red car is parked, is the Robin Williams house. He bought it, I think, in the early 90s. And around 91 or 92, I knew the contractor that was remodeling it. One day he calls me up and says, "You got to come over and see this house." So I was living on the other side of Golden Gate Park at the time. So I came right over and looked at the house. It's pretty fabulous. But when Robin divorced, he moved out, and his ex-wife, I think she still lives there. But anyway, there it is. Now I'm in Lincoln Park, and this building behind me is the Palace of the Legion of Honor. It was built in 1924, and the name Legion of Honor is to honor soldiers that were killed from San Francisco in World War I. So it was built by Alma Spreckels. Alma Spreckels was married to Adolf Spreckels, who owned Spreckels Sugar. Hence the term sugar daddy. Alma was many years younger than him. The Spreckels were in competition with another high society family, the DeYoungs. The DeYoung family owned the Chronicle newspaper and had put up the money for the DeYoung Museum in Golden Gate Park. So Spreckels wanted to have a competing art museum over here in Lincoln Park. This park used to be a graveyard for paupers, a pauper's field. So many of the graves were moved when they built this. Another interesting note, when they did a renovation to this building and added a basement exhibition hall back in the 90s, they found a bunch of graves under the building. So that's a brief history of this place. It's modeled after a museum in France. And I think they had to get permission from the French government to replicate it. There was also a version of it earlier in the 1915 Panama Pacific Exhibition in San Francisco. So next, I'm going to go across the road here and look at the marker for the Lincoln Highway. I'm right across the street from the Palace of the Legion of Honor. This is this marker here is the western terminus of the Lincoln Highway. The Lincoln Highway was the first transcontinental highway in the United States 100 years ago. It started in Times Square in New York City and ended right here. And the idea was to link up roads to have a transcontinental highway through the Midwest. They're usually just little 2-lane roads, but anyway, it worked. And then the Lincoln Highway eventually morphed into Highway 40, and Highway 40 eventually morphed into Highway 80. I'm still across the street from the Legion of Honor, and this is Lincoln Park Golf Course run by the city. And again, this used to be a graveyard, and they turned it into a golf course. Yeah, at some point back, I can't remember exactly, in the 20s or 30s, San Francisco passed an ordinance to prohibit graveyards within the city limits. So the graveyards in San Francisco, most of them were moved to south of the city, to Colma. There's still a graveyard at Mission Dolores, and but the big ones were all moved out of town. I'm at the world famous Cliff House. This structure is was built in 1907, and it's either the third or the fourth Cliff House. I'm not sure, but before this was built, there was a grandiose 7-story Victorian wooden structure that hung out over the cliff, and it burned down. There was no way to get fire suppression equipment out here. It just burned. I call it Sutro's Folly, built by Adolf Sutro. So he had passed away at that time, and his daughter had the Cliff House rebuilt out of concrete, which is the structure we see today. Late 1990s, they remodeled it and put an addition on the north side of it, 2-story dining room, and restored the structure back to its grandiose days. When I was a kid in the 50s, they had modernized it. The guys that owned the amusement park Playland down the street here got a hold of it, and they modernized it and made it what we call mid-century modern. They basically added on a section here and changed the whole facade. So when the Park Service took it over, they stripped off all the 1950 renovations back to the 1907 version, which I happen to like. A lot of people don't, but I do. Here's a picture of the 1950s Cliff House. Like I was explaining, this part here was an addition, and they knocked it off, knocked it down. And then over here it had this false front on it. But so they, in the 90s, they stripped it and reverted back. Now this structure right here in front of me is the addition, the 2-story dining hall that they added on when the Park Service took over. Here's a picture of the Sutro Baths. Sutro built a bathhouse right around the bend here. There were 7 pools with salt water of varying degrees of temperature, and there was a draw for the citizens of San Francisco have a place to go. They actually had a railroad that came out here and ended right above it, so people could get out here and enjoy the Sutro Baths. It had closed down in, I think, 65 or 66, and then fire destroyed the building in 1966. When I was a kid, I went in at one time. The first few floors were exhibit hall of oddities. I remember a mummy and a Tucker automobile was in there. In the front window they had a Tucker automobile. But we're going to take you over here and show you where the baths were. What's the ruins. Here's the ruins of Sutro Baths down below me. So you have to imagine the building, you entered up here at the street level and you went down like several stories to get to the actual pools, and along the way was mezzanines with exhibits of oddities inside the building. But it was quite a big structure, fed by seawater. They come in through those tunnels over there, way over there. The seawater would come in and fill up the tunnel at high tide. Here, across the street from the Cliff House and Sutro Baths, this park, this precipice is where Adolf Sutro had his mansion with this commanding view of the area. Now, Sutro was an immigrant from Prussia, and he made a fortune in the Comstock mines of Nevada. He made his fortune, and he ended up being mayor of San Francisco for a while, and he owned 1/7 of the city. So there's a place called Sutro Forest, where his land Sutro owned, and there was a state law that forest land was tax exempt, so Sutro planted acres and acres of eucalyptus trees on his land to avoid property tax. But he was a public benefactor. Everybody loved him. I'm here in Golden Gate Park at the buffalo pen. The buffalo is indigenous to the Great Plains, and when they're building the railroads, the buffalo herds were nearly wiped out to the point of extinction. So in 1891, they brought a group of buffalo here to live in Golden Gate Park, and they've been here ever since. So it's a rare opportunity to see a buffalo up close. This is the Jefferson Airplane house right across the street from Golden Gate Park. I think they were here in the late 60s, early 70s, something like that. And they lived in this house and had their studio in here. And the house used to be painted black with gold columns. I remember it well. So anyway, a little tidbit of history here. Okay. I'm in the 700 block of Ashbury Street in the what they call the Haight-Ashbury district. Now, when I was a kid, this was a working class neighborhood. There's this pretty much rundown Victorians and cheap rents and stuff like that. In mid 60s, the hippie invasion, people would move here because the rents were cheap. And now these houses are going for a lot of money. They're, for the most part, all fixed up. The brown house behind me is the Grateful Dead house. See how nicely it's fixed up. I'm not a Grateful Dead guy. I'm not a deadhead, but a lot of people are, and a lot of people would be interested in this, the Grateful Dead house. So there it is. And we're about a block and a half up from Haight Street. So they lived here when they're just getting going. So, okay, we're going to move on now. Clear, you can see the view pretty well, but notice how Market Street is aimed right at Twin Peaks. They did that on purpose when they laid out the city. O'Farrell, the surveyor O'Farrell, that was his decision to center Market Street with Twin Peaks. Okay, I'm at the northern peak right here. The northern peak is called Eureka, and the south peak is called Noe. Noe was the last mayor of the town of Yerba Buena. The town of Yerba Buena became the city of San Francisco. Now we're going down the east side of Twin Peaks, where Market Street actually ends and turns into Portola Drive. But Market Street was extended at some point up the east slope of Twin Peaks. So we're going downhill into what's historically known as Eureka Valley, which was a Scandinavian community for many years. When I was a kid, Eureka Valley was a working class blue collar neighborhood, and then in the 70s, I guess, it became the gay mecca. So here's the famous rainbow flag you're seeing here, and we're not going to tour the neighborhood, not in this video, but there's the Castro Theater and the Twin Peaks Bar, and streetcar turning around. There's the Castro Theater again, designed by Timothy Pfluger. Okay, so we're not going to tour the neighborhood. We'll just keep going. Here we are at Mission Dolores, built in 1776, allegedly the oldest building in San Francisco. Originally, this was not in the town of Yerba Buena. It was an outpost connected by a trail to the town of Yerba Buena. Eventually, they came together to form San Francisco. To the left of the mission is a graveyard where there's many pioneers buried and Native Americans of significance. That graveyard was in the movie Vertigo, filmed back in the 50s. So there's some people say that the Presidio, the Officers Club and the Presidio was built around the same time as Mission Dolores. It's probably true, but this is considered to be the oldest building in the city. (1776). The cathedral next door was built after the 1906 earthquake and fire. There was a lot of, in this area, there's a lot of fill. A lot of this area was swampy, and a lot of buildings in this area collapsed. And the church that was there suffered severe damage in the 1906 earthquake. So this building was built, this church was built afterwards. And I forget what style it is. I should know, but I forget. How San Francisco got its name. This is San Francisco, the Assisi, St. Francis of Assisi. Now we're in the Inner Mission District. The Inner Mission is bounded on the east by Highway 101 and Potrero Hill.
On the west by Sanchez Street, the north by 21st Street, and South Street. The south boundary is Army Street. What used to be Army Street, they call it Cesar Chavez now, but us locals like to call it Army Street. Anyway, this is Balmy Alley in the intermission, and these fabulous murals began in the late 60s, early 70s, something like that, by two women muralists. And this is just an interesting piece of San Francisco I wanted to show you. We're not going to tour the Mission District, not in this video, but the Mission District historically was Irish, and then in the 40s, Latino immigrants started settling in it, and the intermission still is about 60% Latino. The Mission District in general, the rents have gone up because of the tech industry, the techies moving in and kind of taken over. But there's a lot of nice restaurants in the area, and there's some that aren't so nice, but it's a very diverse community. Now we're on Potrero Hill. We're east of the Mission District, between the Mission District and the Bay. And this is Vermont Street. Everybody thinks Lombard Street on Russian Hill is the crookedest street in the world, but according to the city engineers, Vermont Street is more crooked, and you can tell for yourself by how tight these turns are. They're tighter than Lombard. There may be less turns than Lombard, but they're much tighter, and you have to go really slow. Here we go. I'm not sure the story why they put this in like this, but I'm sure there's a story behind it. Probably too steep for a regular street. And here we get down to the bottom. Now, Potrero Hill used to be blue-collar, working-class neighborhood years ago, and now it's gentrified. So we're going to take a ride up here. If some of this looks familiar, a lot of chase scenes from the movie Bullet were filmed here back in the day, and TV show Streets of San Francisco. Carl Malden's character lived on Potrero Hill. So a lot of chase scenes from that TV show and Bullet were filmed here in this neighborhood. So we're looking east. You can see the bay in the distance. This Potrero Hill is highly desirable now because of the views and location and the proximity to downtown.
I'm at the tallest point in San Francisco. I'm at the summit of Mount Davidson at 927 feet above sea level. Just a few feet taller than Twin Peaks, actually, but this is a 40-acre city park. The land used to belong to Adolf Sutro. The cross was built in the mid-30s to replace the wooden one that was here before. And they have Easter services here every year. The cross is 103 feet high. And in 1991, several lawsuits were filed against the city for having religious cross on public land. So the courts decided that they either had to tear the cross down or sell the land. So a group of Armenian Americans, coalition of Armenian Americans, bought the land the cross is on. So the Armenians now own the cross, so it's safe. Well, I hope you enjoy my native tour of San Francisco. Thanks for watching.